Hi there. In this video, we're going to be talking about multiplying integers. And remember that when we talk about integers, we're talking about positive and negative numbers. So counting numbers, 0, and their opposites, okay? And so we've talked about adding integers, subtracting integers. Now we have to talk about multiplying integers. Now remember that multiplying is simply just repeated addition, all right? So if I were to, and let's just start simple here. Let's just look at an example. Let's just jump right in, okay? So when we talk about multiplying, what I'm doing is, let's say I'm going to do 2 times 5, okay? When I'm doing 2 times 5, I can write that with 2x5. I could also write that as 2 parentheses 5, and I could then also write that as 2.5. These all mean the same thing, that you're multiplying 2 and 5 together. Now, when I'm doing 2 times 5, this really means 2 groups of 5. So 2 groups of 5. All right, and remember, I'm just doing repeated addition. So 2 groups of 5, meaning I'm really doing 5. Let me do this. 2 times 5 is equal to 5 plus 5, which gives you 10. Okay, and that's the idea. Now, if I were to come in here and do another example and say 5 times 2, okay, remember I could do 5 parentheses 2, or I could do 5.2. All right, these all mean the same thing. All right, so remember, this is saying is 5 groups of 2. All right, so 5 groups of 2. All right, so if I've got 5 groups of 2, 5 times 2 is really saying 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. And if you add all these 2's up, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, you get the same thing, okay? So regardless, another thing that we can talk about with these two problems is this thing called the commutative property, where you can reorder something. So when we do multiplication, 2 times 5 is going to be the same thing as 5 times 2. All right, so if you always want to rewrite it like this, you can, but just know that you can reorder those so that you're adding different numbers. All right, so let's look at multiplying integers, specifically using positive and negative numbers. Now, I just drew this triangle with 2 negatives in the bottom and a positive up top. Draw this every single time that you're doing math. Okay, and here's how this works. One of the things is that if you multiply a positive number times a positive, all right, the result will be positive. Okay, that's what you've been doing for a long time. But if you do a positive times a negative, it's going to give you a negative. If you do a negative times a positive, it's going to give you a negative. And if you do a negative times a negative number, that's going to give you a positive. So you have 4 options here, okay? So now what I do is I do this. So like, let's say that I'm doing 2 times negative 5. All right, so let's just do a new problem here. So example 2 times negative 5. What that means is that I have 2 groups of negative 5. All right, so I have negative 5 plus negative 5, which is going to give me negative 10. Okay, and that's stuff that we learned from the last couple of sections. So if you don't understand this, you got to go back and rewatch that video. That's okay. All right, so but what I want to show you is that the reason why I automatically know, I don't have to do this step always if I know my times tables, but what I can do is I can just go 2 times negative 5, well, that's going to give me negative 10. And what I have here is I have a positive times a negative. So on my paper, I cover up this portion of my triangle because that's what I'm doing, and the result is that my answer will be negative. So whatever your problem is, you cover up those parts of the triangle, and whatever's left over is what your answer is going to be, okay? So now let's look at a different example. And let's look at an example where I have the opposite, where I have negative 2 times 5, okay? And so this one's a little bit harder to show. But what I would do is I just know that my answer is going to be negative 10, all right? Mainly because I just need to know what 2 times 5 is. 2 times 5 gives me 10, but because I'm taking a negative times a positive, and let me come in here and erase this part. So since I'm doing a negative times a positive, I can come over here and I can cover up that portion of my triangle given those two values, just negative and a positive, and I have the result being a negative, okay? So I use this, I don't memorize this so much, but I use this to help me do the math problems, okay? So let's look at one more example. And so let's say that you're multiplying 3 numbers, all right? And so if I'm multiplying more than just 2 numbers, I want to just start at the beginning and just do the first 2 numbers, all right? So 3 times negative 2 is simply just going to be, I have a positive times a negative, so my answer is going to be a negative. And so 3 times 2 is 6, but my answer is negative, so I'm going to get a negative 6 out of that. And then I'm going to multiply that still by negative 4. Now, since I'm doing a negative times another negative, my result is going to be positive. But I just want to do 6 times 4, which is 24. All right, so if I just do the math here and do 6 times 4, 24, negative times a negative is a positive, so therefore I get 24 as my answer, okay? And if you wanted to do, just think of it as like 6 times 4 and add 4 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can do that as well, okay? So all those same rules that we had about repeated addition, that doesn't change, okay? The only thing that changes is that we're adding in some signs in there. We got to keep our signs straight, okay? So let's do one more example. Sorry, I lied. This isn't the last example. Let's do one more real quick. And so in this one, I wanted to show you multiplying 3 negatives together to see what happens as a result of doing that. So again, I'm going to approach this problem the same way as I did the previous one, and I'm going to do negative 2 times negative 2. 2 times 2 is 4. A negative times a negative is a positive. So my result here is going to be a positive 4. All right, so then I'm going to take 4 and then multiply it by negative 2. And so now I'm going to do 4 times 2, which is 8. But because I have a positive times a negative, my result is going to be negative. So I'm going to get negative 8 out of this, all right? And that's my answer. So what I want you to see here is that when you're multiplying more than one number, if the number of numbers that are negative is even, your result will be positive. If the number of negative numbers is odd, then the result will be negative. So that's all I got for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.